Lila was only 5 when the fever came, high and relentless. Her mother's voice was the first thing she remembered being muffled. Then, slowly, everything faded. The sound of footsteps, laughter, the birds outside her window, all blurred into an indistinct hum, like the distant echo of a forgotten memory. By the time the doctors confirmed it, it was already too late. Lila was deaf. Growing up, the world around her seemed to shrink, slowly suffocating under a blanket of isolation. Her parents, although loving and patient, couldn't understand what she was going through. She learned to read lips, to memorize gestures, but there was always a barrier, an unspoken gap that no one knew how to bridge. Music had been her solace since childhood. She would sit by the piano, watching the keys with a kind of yearning. She couldn't hear the notes, but she could see the vibrations, feel the energy as her fingers hovered over the keys. It was as if the piano spoke to her in a language beyond sound, and every time she touched the keys, she felt a connection to something larger than herself. It wasn't enough. She couldn't hear the music, but the idea of it, the hope it gave her, was. Her parents never truly understood her passion. They thought it was a hobby, a phase she would grow out of. But for Lila, it was everything. Even if she couldn't hear the melody, she could sense the rhythm in her bones. She wanted to be a composer, to write the music she couldn't hear, to create a world where sound was not necessary to feel the depth of a melody. At 16, Lila stood before the music conservatory's closed doors, staring up at the old building. A rush of excitement and terror surged through her. She had applied for a scholarship, despite the doubts she knew they would have about her disability. She had no idea what to expect, but she couldn't let this chance slip away. She had to try. As she stepped through the door, she was met with the overwhelming smell of paper and dust, the sound of rustling pages and quiet voices. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with glasses perched on her nose, looked up with a raised brow. "Yes?" she asked, her voice sharp and professional. Lila took a deep breath, letting her fingers gently tap the edge of the counter, a small signal she was ready. "Hot, I'm here for the scholarship audition," Lila signed, her fingers moving gracefully through the air, her face calm but her heart racing. The woman hesitated, her eyes scanning Lila's face as if she were trying to decode something unspoken. After a moment, she nodded. "Follow me." The audition room was cold, the walls lined with portraits of famous composers. A grand piano sat in the center, untouched, waiting. Lila's fingers itched with anticipation. She had practiced for months, even without being able to hear a single note. The judge, an older man with a severe expression, sat behind a desk. His eyes narrowed as Lila sat at the piano. He glanced at her, then back at the sheet of music in front of him. He didn't ask, but she knew he was wondering how someone like her could possibly understand music in a world without sound. Taking a deep breath, Lila's fingers pressed against the cool keys, her body moving in sync with the rhythm only she could feel. She closed her eyes, imagining the melody she had practiced so many times in her mind. Her fingers danced over the keys, not playing a perfect piece, but one that spoke from the depths of her soul. The music that wasn't there filled the room. When she finished, the silence that followed felt thick, almost suffocating. The judge didn't speak. The air was heavy with unspoken judgment, and Lila felt her chest tighten. She couldn't read his face. He was silent, and that silence was louder than anything. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the man spoke. His voice was low, neutral. "Thank you. We'll contact you if we're interested." Lila stood up, her legs trembling, but she didn't look back. She had done it. Despite the silence, despite the doubts, she had taken the first step. As she left the conservatory, the weight of her decision hung heavily on her shoulders. The world had closed its doors to her for so long, but now she had pushed through one of them, and she wasn't going to stop. The days that followed the audition were the longest Lila had ever experienced. She didn't know what she was hoping for, acceptance, rejection, anything. But the waiting was almost unbearable. Each time the phone rang, her heart jumped, only to be crushed when it wasn't the conservatory. She tried to push the thoughts out of her mind to focus on her studies, on the music she was still composing, but the weight of uncertainty hovered over her like a dark cloud. She continued to practice, her fingers moving over the piano keys with determination. Every day she sat at that piano, trying to perfect the melody she had played at the audition. The notes that she couldn't hear became part of her, woven into the rhythm of her life, though they still existed only in her imagination. But one evening, as she sat in the quiet of her room, she saw a letter on the table. It was thick, formal, with the logo of the conservatory at the top. Her heart skipped a beat. Slowly she picked it up, staring at the envelope, as if the answer to her future was hidden in those few inches of paper. She tore it open, her hands trembling, and pulled out the letter. "Dear Miss Lila." Her eyes scanned the words, her heart racing faster with each sentence. And then she read it. "We regret to inform you that, after careful consideration, we will not be offering you a place at our institution." The words hit her like a physical blow. Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, the room felt impossibly small. She sat there, staring at the letter, unable to process what she was reading. Her dream had been shattered, her future slipping away. Her mother came in, concern written all over her face. "Lila, what's wrong?" Lila didn't look up. She couldn't. She didn't have the words to explain the crushing weight of disappointment that was settling in her chest. Her mother walked over and sat beside her, reaching out to take the letter from her hand. "Oh, honey," she said softly, her voice thick with sympathy. "I'm so sorry." Lila shook her head, her eyes welling up with tears she had been holding back for so long. I really tried." Her mother wrapped her arms around her, pulling her close. "I know you did. You've always given everything, Lila. You don't need them to tell you how talented you are." But Lila couldn't hear the comfort in her mother's words. The silence felt even louder now. Her mind raced, her heart ached, and her dreams seemed to be slipping farther out of reach with every passing second. The next few days were a blur of emotions. Lila's grief turned to anger, then to a quiet resolve. She couldn't give up, not now, not after coming so far. She had already taken one step toward her dream. She had pushed through the closed door, even if it hadn't opened for her the way she had hoped. One evening, as she sat at her piano, Lila made a decision. She would find another way. There had to be a way to make her dream a reality, even if it meant breaking the rules, even if it meant doing things differently than anyone else. The world had already closed so many doors in her face, but this time Lila was determined to open one herself. Lila sat at the piano, her fingers hovering above the keys, her mind consumed by the silence. The symphony was finished. She could feel it in her bones, the way the notes pulsed in her body, though the sound itself was absent. Each movement, each chord was a part of her, a part of a dream too big for the world around her. But the world had already shut her out. The conservatory had rejected her. The doors she had fought to open had slammed shut, but she was not ready to give up. She was alone in her small apartment, the walls closing in. But tonight something felt different. She had done the work. The symphony was finished. She had sent it off, with nothing but hope and trembling hands. She had done all she could. And then it came. The email. She had been waiting for days. The sound of her fingers tapping the table was the only rhythm she had. But when the notification blinked on her screen, her heart skipped. She hesitated. Would they dismiss her? Would they laugh? She opened it. The words were simple. We've reviewed your symphony. We would be honored to perform it. Lila's chest tightened. She read it again. And again. The message felt too surreal to process. Honored. To perform her work. She couldn't hear the notes, but this was her moment. Her mind spun. She had been dreaming of this, of being heard, of making a mark. The rejection was in the past, but this was everything she had fought for. The orchestra would play her symphony. They would bring her music to life, even if she couldn't hear it. Lila's heart raced as she stared at the screen. She didn't know how it had happened, but it was real. The dream, the symphony, her work, it was happening. Weeks later, Lila found herself backstage. The orchestra was ready, the lights dim, and everything felt quiet. The vibrations beneath her feet were the only indication that the music was about to begin. She closed her eyes, her body trembling with anticipation. The conductor raised his hands. The first notes, the first wave of sound, swept through the room, and she felt it. The silence that had once been so overwhelming was now her ally, her guide. She had turned it into something real, something powerful. And as the symphony unfolded, she realized something. This was her voice. The music, though unheard by her, was hers. No matter what the world had said, no matter how many doors had slammed in her face, this was the moment she had fought for, and nothing could take it away. The night after her symphony's performance was supposed to be a victory, but the thrill of success quickly faded as she left the stage, the weight of the world settling back on her shoulders. The music had filled the hall, but now, in the aftermath, the silence was deafening. Lila had made her mark, but she knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The next morning, Lila received an email from the orchestra's manager. The message was brief, almost too businesslike. We regret to inform you your symphony will not be performed again. We have received feedback regarding your ability to direct future works. A professional collaboration is no longer viable. Lila stared at the email. Her heart sank as the words blurred together. She couldn't understand why. She had done everything right. She had followed the rules. She had poured everything into the music. What had gone wrong? Had they been lying about their enthusiasm? Before she could get an answer, she was interrupted by a sudden presence at her door. A man appeared in her doorway without knocking. He was tall, his face unfamiliar, and his eyes were unnervingly intense. "Are you Lila?" he asked, stepping closer into her space. "Yes. Who are you?" Lila replied, her body tense. "My name is Greg," he said. moving as if he belonged there. I work with musicians who don't quite fit the usual mold, like yourself. Lila immediately felt uneasy. She tried to hide her suspicion. What do you want? He smiled. I think we can help each other. You see, not everyone appreciates talent, but there's a place for composers like you. People who push the boundaries, who can't be boxed in. We know about your symphony, and we think it deserves a wider audience. His words hung in the air, and Lila felt herself drawn to his offer. But something didn't sit right. She had worked hard to get where she was, and this stranger, this man who seemed too smooth, too rehearsed, didn't feel trustworthy. "Why are you here?" she asked again, narrowing her eyes. "We want to support you, give you a platform where your work will be appreciated. There are investors, powerful people who see your potential, Lila. All you have to do is say yes." The offer felt too easy. It was like a trap closing in. She knew she was vulnerable, but she wasn't desperate. She couldn't let anyone take control of her dream, not without knowing the true cost. "Thank you, but no. I'll manage on my own," Lila said firmly, her voice shaking. She closed the door before he could respond, and her heart raced. The next few days were a blur of confusion. The rejection email from the orchestra still lingered, and Greg's offer gnawed at her. How had things turned so quickly? What was happening behind the scenes? That night, her apartment was broken into. When Lila returned home, she found everything in disarray. Papers scattered across the floor, her computer missing. Someone had been searching for something she hadn't realized was important until now. Feeling exposed, she reached out to Ava, a fellow composer from her past who had always believed in her talent. Ava had supported Lila through thick and thin, and if anyone could help her make sense of what was happening, it was her. But when Lila arrived at Ava's apartment, she found the door unlocked. Inside, the lights were dim. Ava's piano was still open, but there was an eerie silence. "Ava?" Lila called out, her voice barely above a whisper. Ava emerged from the other room, looking disheveled and anxious. "Lila, you shouldn't have come. It's not safe anymore," Ava said, her face pale, her eyes darting nervously. "What's going on?" Lila demanded. "What do you mean it's not safe?" I can't say much, but those people, Greg and the others, they're not who they seem. They don't care about your music. They want to control it. And they'll stop at nothing to make sure you play by their rules." Lila's stomach turned. "But they offered me a chance." Ava shook her head. "No, Lila, it's not a chance. It's a trap. You need to get out of here now." Lila's mind raced. She had been so close to her dream, and now it was slipping away. The people who had once supported her, the music world she had hoped to conquer, it was all turning on her. And worse, she realized, she was not alone in this fight. She was a pawn in someone's game. As she left Ava's apartment, she couldn't shake the feeling that things had just gotten far more dangerous than she ever imagined. Lila couldn't escape the gnawing sense of betrayal that clouded her thoughts. She had spent years, sacrificed so much to create something real, something that was hers. Yet the world seemed to close its doors every time she pushed, every time she reached for her dream. The email from the orchestra manager still lingered in her inbox, and every time she looked at it, it felt like a reminder of everything slipping through her fingers. She hadn't expected it to be easy, but she hadn't expected this kind of rejection either. The symphony had been her breakthrough, her moment of validation, and now it felt like the rug had been pulled out from under her. That night she sat at her piano staring at the keys, her fingers hesitant. The silence felt different now, heavier, like it was suffocating her creativity. She needed to do something, anything, to take back control. But what? How could she fight back against something she couldn't even fully understand? The next morning, as she walked to the small cafe where she often worked on her compositions, she noticed a familiar face in the distance. It was Ava, her friend, the one person who had always stood by her. Ava was standing near the entrance of the cafe, her arms folded across her chest. She looked anxious, her eyes darting around nervously. Lila approached her. "Ava, what's going on?" Ava looked up, startled, and then quickly stepped closer. "Lila, we need to talk. It's not safe for you here anymore. You have to leave the city." Lila froze. "What are you talking about? Why would I leave?" Ava glanced around, her voice dropping to a whisper. "There are people after you, the ones who've been pulling strings with your symphony. They've been watching you. It's not just Greg anymore. There's more to this, much more, and you're in danger." Lila shook her head, trying to make sense of what Ava was saying. "What are you saying? I don't understand." "You don't get it, do you?" Ava's voice was tense, filled with fear. "These people, they want control over your music. They'll stop at nothing to get it. They don't care about you. They don't care about your dreams. They care about power. You've become a pawn in their game." Lila's mind raced. She had always known that there was something off about Greg, something unsettling about the way he had presented himself, but she hadn't expected this. She had thought that maybe she could negotiate, make a deal. But now it felt like she had been playing into someone else's hands all along. "I don't know what to do, Ava," Lila whispered, her voice cracking. "I just want to make music. I just want to be heard." Ava looked at her with a mix of sympathy and determination. "Then you need to get out of here. You need to disappear for a while. If you stay, they'll come for you. You're already on their radar." Lila felt a chill run down her spine. Could she really leave everything behind? Could she walk away from the life she had worked so hard to build? As she stood there, her heart torn between the need to fight for her dreams and the overwhelming fear of what might happen if she stayed, Ava pulled out a small envelope from her bag and handed it to Lila. "This is the only way. You'll find a place to stay outside the city. There's a contact there who can help you lay low for a while. It's your only chance." Lila hesitated for a moment, staring at the envelope. She had never been good at running away. She had always fought, always pushed forward. But Ava's words echoed in her mind, and she knew she had no other choice. The fight wasn't over, but for now, she had to protect herself. "Okay," Lila finally said, her voice trembling. "I'll go, but I'll be back. I won't let them take my music." Ava nodded, her eyes softening. "I know you won't, but right now, your safety is the most important thing. Everything else can wait." Lila tucked the envelope into her coat pocket, her mind already racing with the possibilities. She didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was clear. She wasn't going to give up. She couldn't. Her music, her future depended on it. As she turned to leave, she felt a strange sense of finality. The city, the people, the life she had known. It was all slipping away. But it was only temporary. She would find a way back. She would make her music heard, no matter the cost. Lila had never imagined that running away from her life would feel like a kind of death. Leaving the city behind, she felt like she was burying everything she had fought for, her music, her dream. In the small, remote town where she had hidden, it was quiet, too quiet, and that silence began to suffocate her. Each day she got up, went into town for supplies, came back to her little house, sat at the piano, but the music she played felt hollow, disconnected. One evening, as she sat at the piano, there was a knock at the door. Lila didn't hear it, but she felt the presence. Someone was standing in the doorway. A woman, tall and calm, appeared in the dim light. "Are you Lila?" she asked without stepping forward. Lila looked up, her heart racing. "Who are you?" "I know who you are," the woman said, "and I know what you're running from." Lila froze. She didn't know what to think. The woman's gaze was sharp, her eyes knowing, like someone who had seen too much. Lila felt the weight of this moment. "Oh, what do you want from me?" Lila managed to ask, her voice shaky. The woman stepped forward slightly. "I'm here to give you a choice. You can stay here, hiding, and they'll find you. Or you can act now." Lila's breath caught in her throat. "I can't run anymore." "You don't have to," the woman replied. "But you need to make a decision. You're not safe here. Not anymore." She reached into her coat and pulled out an envelope. She handed it to Lila. "Everything you need for the next step is in here." Lila hesitated, staring at the envelope. She had never been good at running. She had always fought, always pushed forward. But the woman's words rang in her ears, and Lila knew she had no other choice. She had to act. There was no more hiding. She took the envelope and nodded silently. "You're not alone in this," the woman said. "But you have to make your move now, before they do." With that, the woman turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. Lila stood there in the doorway, the envelope heavy in her hands. The decision had been made. There was no turning back now. The envelope felt heavy in Lila's hands as she watched the woman disappear into the shadows. It was hard to explain the mix of emotions swirling inside her: fear, confusion, but also a strange sense of urgency. She had always been a fighter, but now it felt like her fight had evolved into something bigger than herself, something she didn't fully understand yet. The cottage, the small town, it all felt so distant now. The life she had hoped to rebuild here suddenly seemed like a dream. The music, her music, was her only connection to who she really was. But now even that seemed out of reach. She had no choice but to take the next step, whatever that was. And this envelope was the key. Lila sat down at the small desk in the corner of the room, the dim light from the lamp casting long shadows. Her fingers trembled as she opened it, revealing a simple note and a map, marked with an unfamiliar address. It wasn't much. There were no instructions, no guarantees, just a destination. She stared at the map for a long time, trying to figure out what to do next. She knew she couldn't stay in the town much longer. It was only a matter of time before someone would come looking for her. But where did this path lead? And why did it feel like the moment she picked up the envelope, her entire world shifted? Her eyes traced the route marked on the map, and in the back of her mind she heard something. A melody, soft, distant, but familiar. It was as though the map itself was calling to her, urging her forward. Without thinking, she grabbed her coat and set out into the night. The journey was harder than she had imagined. She wasn't prepared for the loneliness of the road, the way the cold bit into her skin, or the overwhelming sense that she was walking into the unknown. Yet, with each step, there was a pull, or a desire to understand what had just begun to unravel before her. The music, once a source of comfort, was now a mystery, a riddle she was desperate to solve. Days blurred together as she traveled. The roads grew more rugged, the landscape more barren. But Lila didn't stop. She couldn't. She felt like she was running towards something bigger than herself, and she couldn't turn back. When she finally arrived at the address on the map, she found herself standing before a dilapidated building, a warehouse on the outskirts of a forgotten town. The walls were covered in peeling paint, and the windows were boarded up. There was no sign of life, but something about the place felt alive. Lila hesitated. Should she knock? Should she enter? She had no idea what awaited her inside. But then, just as she was about to turn away, the door creaked open. A man stood in the doorway, his face shadowed by the darkness. His eyes were unreadable, but there was a warmth in them, a familiarity that made Lila pause. "You're Lila," he said simply, his voice low but confident. Lila nodded. "How do you know me?" The man stepped aside, inviting her in. "I've been waiting for you." Inside, the warehouse was nothing like she expected. It was filled with instruments, old, new, some broken, some gleaming with potential. It felt like a place where music was born from chaos. "This is where the music happens," the man said, gesturing around the room. "You've been running from it, Lila, but music isn't something you can escape. It's in you." Lila stared at the instruments, her breath catching in her throat. She had spent so many years doubting herself, running from her own potential. But now, in this room filled with instruments, she felt something awakening inside her. A surge of creativity, a hunger to create, to be heard. "You've come this far," the man said. "Now let's see what you can do with it." Lila stood frozen for a moment. Could she really do it? Could she finally face the music? She had been running from it for so long, but now it seemed like the only thing that could save her. She walked over to a piano in the corner of the room, the same one she had always played on in her dreams. Her fingers brushed the keys, and the moment her hands touched the keys, a rush of energy flowed through her. It was as though the music had been waiting for her all this time just beyond her reach, and now it was finally hers. The melody that came from her hands was unlike anything she had ever played before. It was raw, unfiltered, like a part of her soul was pouring out through the keys. The room seemed to hum with energy as the notes filled the air, vibrating with emotion, with truth. For the first time in years, Lila didn't feel like she was fighting the world. She felt like she was becoming one with it, letting her music carry her to places she never thought she would go. The man watched her play, his expression unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, something that spoke of pride, of understanding. "You found it," he said quietly. "This is your power. You've been afraid of it, but now you know it's yours to claim." Lila's hands moved faster across the keys, her confidence growing with each passing note. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't hiding. She was finally embracing her true self, the musician she had always been, the artist she had always dreamed of becoming. And this was only the beginning. The energy that coursed through Lila as her fingers danced across the piano keys was beyond anything she had ever experienced. Each note she played seemed to vibrate through her body, a rush of emotion, raw and untamed. The music, her music, poured from her as if it had been trapped inside her for years, waiting for the moment to break free. It was everything she had ever longed for, yet there was something profound about it. She was playing like she never had before, and yet, as beautiful as the music sounded, she couldn't hear a single note. She couldn't hear the music, but she could feel it. The melody that flowed from her hands was vibrant, powerful, but entirely silent to her ears. She played with a passion, a fire, but the truth was, she was only hearing it through her fingers, through the vibrations of the piano that resonated deep inside her chest. It was the strangest experience, like being part of a grand performance, but standing on the edge of it, unable to hear the applause, the cheers, the rise and fall of the crowd. But it didn't matter. With each chord, with each powerful movement of her fingers, she was more alive than she had ever been. The sound was more than the music. It was her soul, her very essence. She could feel the power of every note as it wrapped around her, filled the room. She felt the music in her bones, in her heart, in the very air she breathed. She could see the man standing across the room, watching her intently, but all she could focus on was the music, the vibrations under her fingertips, the rush of energy building inside her. "You've found it," he said quietly, as if reading her mind. "You've embraced your true power, even without hearing it." Lila's fingers hovered above the keys for a moment. She felt the echo of the music in the air, the energy lingering in the room. She had finally found what had been missing, what she had been running from for so long. What, even though she couldn't hear it, the music was speaking louder than anything she had ever known. "I haven't heard a note," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "But I've never played like this before." The man nodded. "Because you're no longer trying to control the music. You're allowing it to control you." The weight of his words settled in her mind. It was true. For so long she had tried to force her music into something that fit into the world's expectations. But now, here in this room, she had let it flow. Let it be what it was meant to be. "Now, Lila," the man continued, stepping closer. "The world is ready for what you have to offer. But you need to step out of the shadows. You've been running long enough. The next step is yours to take." Lila felt a sense of finality in those words. It was time. Time to stop hiding. Time to stop running from the music that had always been inside her. The world would never know what she had to offer if she stayed in the dark. She stood up from the piano, feeling the last echoes of the music reverberating inside her. She was more than ready. She was whole. The music was hers, and it had never been clearer. The man watched her, and this time there was no unreadable expression on his face. There was approval, a silent acknowledgement that she had come into her own. "Are you ready to be heard?" he asked, his voice soft but firm. Lila nodded, her heart racing with anticipation. "Yes." She stepped away from the piano, her hand brushing the keys one last time. And then, with the envelope still tucked safely in her coat pocket, she walked toward the door. The road ahead was unclear, but the path she was about to take was hers. Her music was her voice, and now she was ready to let it be heard. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't hiding. She was stepping into the world, a world that would soon hear the symphony she had always known existed within her. The only thing left was to make them listen. Lila's story is about the importance of not being afraid of our inner barriers and doubts. It's a story of a person who, despite all obstacles and her apparent weakness, didn't give up. Lila lost one of the most important senses in life, her hearing, but her music didn't disappear. It was there, inside her, a part of herself, and she found a way to be heard, even if she could not hear it herself. Through her journey, we realize that strength is not always about being normal or following accepted standards. True strength is accepting yourself, your uniqueness, and your weaknesses, turning them into your strengths. In this story, Lila teaches us that the most important thing is to pursue your goal, even when the path seems unclear, and not to be afraid to go to the places where no one is expecting you. It's not about being heard by others. It's about hearing yourself and being true to yourself. She discovered that music is not just sound, but the expression of her soul. Music, like life itself, is not always what we hear, but what we feel. And her example shows us how important it is to stop hiding from the world and give ourselves a chance to be who we truly are, no matter how others perceive us. If you feel like something is missing, if it seems like the world is closing doors in front of you, remember, your strength lies in finding the keys inside yourself and opening those doors on your own. As Lila showed, sometimes you just need to allow yourself to be authentic, to feel your power, and to begin creating. What do you think of Lila's journey? Have you ever faced a challenge where you had to trust yourself and embrace your true power? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. We'd love to hear your story and how you relate to the message of never giving up and finding your own path.